Sure. Well, dancing, music, the arts. I mean, these were things that were like very common in my family growing up. I come from a big family, oldest of 8 kids, and cradle Catholic. And my both of my parents, my mother had done ballet. She was, even as an adult, always taking ballet classes for herself and prioritizing that as like a form of exercise and expression. My father knew how to sing. He knew how to draw. We would sing together often as a family. So like attend movies together. My father had, dabbled a bit in the theater. So we had, with the humanities and the arts were very strong in my family growing up. So even say, for example, when I wanted to actually started my undergraduate career at 18 pursuing acting and directing and theater, like this was something that my family supported, and it kind of was happy for me for. So I started dancing. I was one of those people like those girls like starts dancing very young. I started ballet when I was 7, and I was just one of those girls that like never told mommy I wanted to quit. So I always enjoyed it. I kept I danced all the way through high school, and I got into college. I didn't pursue dancing as a career option. I was taking classes all the time. And so dancing as a form of, I would say kind of primarily, but not, only as a form of exercise and as a form of creative expression, like was something I just grew up with, I mean, down to like, we'd have, dance parties in the kitchen, when we would be cleaning up, after dinner, so that was a very much like kind of part of like the family experience. I did not get introduced into like social dancing until like social partner dancing, until really college. I mean, I knew about ballroom. I knew what ballroom was like. I had grown up watching the movie Strictly Ballroom, which to this day is still one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite movies about dancing, partner dancing specifically. And but it really wasn't until my junior year of college that I really kind of got a formal introduction to both ballroom and social dancing. And I can talk about the difference in a second. So I took a introduction to ballroom class actually at my university, DeSales University. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and they had at the time the chair of the dance department, Tim Cowart, was had been an Arthur Murray trained ballroom instructor. So for those who know what Arthur Murray is, it's one of kind of the bigger ballroom franchises, and it's been around for years and years. And so he knew how to ballroom dance. He knew how to teach that. So he offered Intro to Ballroom as like a PE credit. So it was a really great idea because you got all sorts of people in there. You got dance majors because we had a really strong dance program. You got the jocks, you got the PE students, and you had like a whole, mesh of kids just kind of wanting to get their PE credit done, for their degree. And so you got a lot of different, kids with a lot of different, skill sets and focuses. And I really fell in love with it as a kind of as another form of expression in dancing. I had loved ballet. I'd done ballet mostly growing up, and I had never really aspired to anything professional. But while I didn't love ballet enough to aspire to professionally, I also was kind of cognizant that I didn't really have a ballet ideal body. And this, you can say like things have shifted with the ballet world, since, then. But I found a dance style that was social. I'm an extroverted, very social person. It's with another person, and you get a chance to kind of get to, if you want to talk to that person while you're dancing. And it was a place where I really felt like, okay, this is a dance style where I really kind of fit into this. I fit into this. Like there's no kind of exclusion based on body type, for example. Now didn't have any scarring experiences of exclusion based on body type, but as a dancer, when you grow up dancing, you're always kind of aware of it. So anyway, so I met ballroom dancing in college, and I kind of wanted to dance more. And we didn't have a social dancing scene on campus. We didn't have a club or anything. And that course was only, one semester. And I was like, I walked away from that being, like, hey, like I want to do more. And so Lehigh University, which is a, couple, hop, skip, and a jump away from DeSales, had like a really active swing/Lindy Hop club. So I started going there, and it was, other than being like a great form of exercise, social life, and, an expression for me at the time, I think it was really, I was, you know, I always kind of felt like I'd been a bit of an old soul. I loved older music. I loved older movies. I loved like big band music. And then of course you'd have like artists like, you know, Stellar that are taking that big band sound and kind of remixing it to like a electro swing style. And I was falling in love with that. And it also like my senior year was very stressful, you know, and just course load, also just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and my major. And it was a huge stress relief, you know, because I could dance, and I wouldn't, you know, it was the kind of the place I would go and not really take all the responsibilities of like classes and my job and everything with me. And it was very free, you know, and so I kept on, I danced all through senior. I went back and took the same course again, my second semester of my senior year. And Tim Cower, the chair that had the dance department, actually pulled me aside one day and was like, you know, like you could actually be a really good ballroom instructor, you know? And I looked at it and I was like, I'm about to graduate and I think I know what I'm doing in my life. And why are you saying this to me now? You know? And I mean, I was flattered, but I was also like, what, you know, what am I going to do with this? And, so I got back home to you know, upstate New York. I'm originally from like Ithaca area, Cortland proper in New York. And there was no Arthur Murray studio nearby, but there was a Fred Astaire dance studio nearby. And so between attending the Fred Astaire studio, dance studio as a student, I was also like social dancing in the area. And like, cause Syracuse and Ithaca had a bit of a social dance scene. This would have been 2016 at the time. And as I was taking lessons, especially when I kind of got like more one-on-one instruction in dancing, I really became aware that dancing with a man, which was very different for me, you know, was a way where I kind of really started to discover my femininity. And I started to realize that while I wouldn't necessarily criticize that young woman I had been in college, I wouldn't have criticized her. I think and even though I had a wonderful, very, you know, robust Catholic education, I was homeschooled through a classical curriculum, Mother Divine Grace, which I will always talk well about. My mother and father both had their degrees in theology. My mother, Lisa Lickona, has her licentiate. So it's not like I left the house with a poor Catholic education. Right. But I didn't really understand my Catholic femininity, I would say. Like what that meant to be as a woman, you know, and in college I certainly hadn't embraced it because I didn't know. I didn't have like really anywhere to start with that. So I understood myself very like, you know, kind of more on the motherly role, like getting things done, you know, being the responsible one, the oldest of a big family, but in partner dancing, I started to like become aware of another side of myself as a woman at 22. And I was really moved by this. I was really moved by this because and what the kind of the primary thing is that you kind of have to understand this about ballroom and social dancing. And this is something they both share in common to a certain degree. In the partnership, some person is the initiator or the leader, and the other person is the follower or the receiver. Right. And the common names, the common terminology has been lead and follow. And initiator and receiver was like, these are actually kind of words I've coined for myself to kind of, because I feel to understand more deeply like what the responsibility of each role is in the partnership. And I learned kind of for the first time being a partner is that I have to receive. Like the gentleman initiates the move and the dance doesn't work. The dance doesn't work if I'm always trying to anticipate what he's going to do, or I decide what's happening all the time. Huh. And the dance like literally won't work. Like you will stall with your partner and you won't have a partnership where the two of you are working together. And I was like, wow, like, and I saw this kind of also my own personality. I was like, wow, like I've always been very much the initiator, very assertive. I'm an extroverted personality. You know, I've had no problem kind of in leadership roles. And I was like, wow, like I'm really good at the lead thing. And I want to be better at the receiving thing. Like this is a beautiful experience I'm having, learning how to be the receiver. And being the receiver is somebody who's like taken care of, you know. I was like, wow, like I want to be able to do both. Like I saw myself and I was like, you know, you're really good at the lead thing, Monica, but I want to know how to be able to turn that off and just receive, you know, the lead of my partner and him taking care of me in a beautiful dance. Or I want to be able to, you know, and that made me look at kind of, you know, relationships differently. And actually never had really an intimate relationship with a man like before that time. And I was like, wow, this is something I want to unlock. And so that really kind of was a pivotal moment in my dance journey, I would say, even to why I was like, okay, ballroom dancing, partner dancing is kind of really where I want to stay. It's what moves me. It's what I want to hone into more. And that gave me a lot of drive, even in moments where I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going, you
Right.
know.
You
And
know, Monica, you mentioned a term. I haven't heard that before. You mentioned Catholic femininity. Now, I'm familiar with theology of the body
mhm.
and discussions like that. So, to talk a little bit more about Catholic femininity, particularly for you in your own development and in terms of your identity as a woman, as a
Mhm.
Catholic, what exactly is Catholic femininity?
Well, I would say, like, I mean, it is. I mean, you know, I want to be careful because I don't want to say anything that's like not completely grounded in truth, because I've never done a formal, you know,
Right.
um, I've never done a formal course of theology of the body, though I would say, like, I got all that kind of through osmosis, through the education I received at kind of the hands of Mother Divine Grace and my parents.
Right.
But so it's funny. My sister actually did the whole theology of the body course, and she turned to my mom and she was like, you know what, Mom, like, none of this was news to me. Like, I knew all this, like, based on how you raised us, you know, like, and a huge part of that was like seeing like a family, like, you know, in faith that was open to life. But
Right.
for me, I would say, like, um, I've discovered it to mean, like, you know, um, what it means to kind of in the role of being a woman. And I think that, like, that, you know, it's kind of, it lives between, like, you know, well, you know, you're not passive. It's like you say
Right.
yes to everything,
Right.
but you also know that, like, you know, like the church, like Christ is the bridegroom and the church is his bride. Christ takes care of his church. And Catholic, you know, for me, like, my Catholic femininity is like, okay, I know when to let myself be cared for, right? Like,
Right.
I know how to be the receiver and let someone, you know, pursue me, woo me, address my needs, you know. And I would like to quote, actually, though, like, a book that was actually very influential with me, or for me at this time. It's called The Surrendered Single by Laura Doyle, and she's not a Catholic. She's a woman of faith. She's not a Catholic, but she this is a book I read and trying to understand. I guess I kind of read it in a desperate attempt to understand, like, how I would navigate my own dating life, you know. But she talks about, she wrote this is a book my mother also you know, got me excited about. She wrote a book called The Surrendered Wife, and it was essentially how she saved her marriage from divorce, and she saved it very much by changing kind of a lot of her own habits as a woman, like growing into her own femininity. And then single women kind of were after her, like, please write a book for singles, you know. And so she wrote The Surrendered Single, and it was about, like, kind of knowing, like, how not to, like, necessarily become passive, but how to know, like, how to invite receiving, right? How to invite receiving. Now, this is important. This really is important if you see partner dancing as between, like, a man and a woman,
Right.
which, you know, now is, you know, as we're kind of moving into deeper into the 21st century, that's actually not, people wouldn't categorize partner dance. Some people wouldn't categorize partner dancing as that anymore.
Right.
And this is kind of one of the I guess one of the spots I realize I'm in. Like, you can't talk. I talk about partner dancing as, like, between a man and a woman
Right.
primarily, right? And that is something that is very much challenged right now, or not really, is maybe starting to be considered taboo in some places. Because gender roles, and man is not man and woman is not woman anymore, because gender is fluid.
Right.
I would credit, and I read that book kind of around the same time in my early 20s. I would credit that book in conjunction with my experience in ballroom dancing, really tying into what I've understood about my Catholic femininity. And I would also, like, be the first to admit that that also is, like, that's not like a hard and fast thing. That's something that's maturing. And I know, like, I'm not a wife and mother yet. And I, you know, like, as I become, say, a wife and a mother, that understanding of my Catholic femininity will mature. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Very, very intriguing. I think we can always talk more about that. You also mentioned about, so in partner dancing, you invite the man to fulfill his role. You
Mhm.
create that opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and then we can talk about how that can tie into teaching couples, because
Mhm.
I've had that experience doing that, and sometimes you have to give the greatest challenges. So how do you invite a man who's not willing to take the lead or to care for, to move into that role and at the same time protect yourself, but then at the same time invite this person to step up and to be a provider. And how do you do that on the dance floor?
Well, so a lot of that actually kind of has to do, and it'd probably be a little bit more helpful if I could, demonstrate this physically in like full body shot, but I will do my best verbally to describe this. There is many methodologies of teaching, and there's many different styles of dancing. So for example, some dances are known to be danced closer and some not so much, right? But even if you are dancing, say, I mean, the polite thing to do when you're dancing with somebody is to kind of stay at 6 inches or more. But like if you like, no matter kind of the proximity of the partner, there's actually ways. And when I teach ladies and gentlemen, like, or couples, or if I have a group class, right, I teach them like there's ways to put yourself into the frame, we call it, right? The frame is what the man and the woman create together when they bring their bodies together. And I actually, when I teach, something I adopted over time was like, and I learned this from other teachers that were better than me, honestly, was that like the partners don't get to touch each other until they can execute their footwork on their own. It was like, you do not get to the responsibility and the honor of kind of joining together with your partner until I can see that you can do your part well. Right?
That is so excellent, actually, because when it comes to marriage prep or catechesis about what does it mean to be a Catholic husband or Catholic wife, it does make sense. I need to do my part. I need to work on my own virtues. I need to make sure my life is sacramentally sound before I can anticipate providing for the other. So there's that part where the partner has to take responsibility, and you shouldn't, and you as a partner shouldn't jeopardize yourself because somebody's being negligent. I mean, that could speak volumes into marriage therapy. I mean, it's just, as you're speaking, I see how these are cues for people that may deal with relational issues, boundaries. Where do I start? Where do I end? Where do you start? Where do you end? Very, very, very interesting. So part of what you do is teach the man or teach the woman what their role is, what their responsibility is first, before they get the honor of touching. That's
exactly. And it's like, and for every dance it's different. So for example, if you're going to learn like salsa, a very fun, fast Latin dance, right? Now usually the footwork, you're mirroring your partner. So whatever they're doing on the left leg as a lead, their lady's doing on the right foot to start, So like I have them face each other and like they're not touching, but I was like, okay, like here's what your feet are doing, and here's approximately the timing in which your feet is moving. And the way I talk about dancing, kind of very, very fundamentally, dancing is shifting your weight in time to a rhythm. And then every dance kind of expounds upon that, right? So like salsa, waltz, swing, Lindy hop, bachata, like it doesn't matter, right? It's some form of shifting your weight in time to a rhythm. And then there's layers on top of that. And the other thing I also, after the footwork, right? When the couple actually gets to come together, there's a way that the lead connects with the lady's hand, the way that the woman connects with the gentleman's side when they connect, and they give. And like I said, there's different people. Some people will teach like some things about this differently, but I think in every dance, when you bring two bodies together, there needs to be that both partners have to give each other like a little bit of what I'd say pressure or energy, right? And so there's never any gripping, for example. You don't grip the partner, right? Because that's like to grip the partner is the same thing as trying to live in the anxiety about somebody else's mistakes instead of taking care of your own stuff, right? It's like, my partner's not virtuous. It's like, okay, well, yes, your partner needs to grow in this area of virtue, but you can work on your own area of virtue, and here's how, right? And I even talked to my gentleman, like, okay, this is how you would invite, and this is how you're going to build the best connection to initiate movements to your partner. And then I talked to my ladies, I'm like, okay, this is how you can set yourself up in the best way to receive those cues from your partner, right? So like you put your hand here, you put your hand here, and you can kind of feel, right, his body, his weight shifts, right? Because fundamentally, leading is getting your partner to shift their weight in time with yours. Like that is what leading is, right?
But I know it sounds technical and it kind of makes sense, and you're right. I think once people get to experience that. So if I can just ask you for yourself, if you're willing to be vulnerable about it, would you be willing to share your best experience on the dance floor, and then share what your worst experience has been on the dance floor, just as a way of maybe sharing for others what they can expect or what they should avoid. Do you have any stories when it comes to partner dancing that falls
Yeah,
into
I
that?
think that well, I think that, and I think my worst experiences, I would say the ones that I kind of look back and they're actually not even necessarily, it's not even necessarily with a partner that I don't, like, I danced with once and then he was gone. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think that all of these can kind of be lumped into a similar category. I did have a partner, who he was a ballroom partner, so he and I competed together. We performed together at our studio for shows and events. We would also social dance together, at different things. And he's not the only experience, but I would say kind of like categorizably, that's not a word, I'm sorry, categorically speaking, the worst experience on the dance floor as a partner is when your partner is really only focused on themselves.
Yeah, selfishness.
And I did have, and this was kind of a professional experience. But I've also had experience like social on the floor when you're dancing with a lead, and they're moving their body, and they're moving their feet, they're moving their body, and their arms and their feet, and they're moving everything, and they might look great if you took me out of the picture. And I'm like, okay, you're dancing in front of me, but your body's not communicating really like how I'm supposed to move, where I'm supposed to move. And it very quickly, like within a matter of seconds, you just kind of feel like not cared about as a partner. And, those are kind of like, those are the worst experiences when it's like, okay, well, you might as well be dancing by yourself, because it's like, you're not dancing like I'm even part of the picture, and I would say like, and like that was some person I experienced with a lot, which is why one of the reasons that partnership was really tense after a while. But I've danced socially. I've danced with guys like that, and it can be something as simple as like, they try a move with you, you don't get it, and they just blow through it and go try something else, and you're just like, okay, well, whatever. Okay, well, I just looked terrible, but you're just going to move on to the next thing, And that's why I talk about kind of the honor of coming together and partnering, is because when you come together, you're making something new. No longer is it just you and just him. You're making something new. And actually, there's lots of styles of dance where you literally wouldn't be able to achieve the effects that the two people have together on your own. Like Lindy Hop is very similar because there's a lot of counterweight action. Viennese waltz, forget it. You're never going to look that good by yourself dancing Viennese waltz if you have a partner, because you need the counterweight of the two partners to work.
Right.
So, and I would say kind of my best experience. And that's probably like categorically probably my
If I can comment while you're thinking, it's interesting. You're talking about virtues, on the fruits like love, joy, peace, patience, but then you have the contrary to that, being selfish and being uncharitable, those type of things. It sounds like you're talking about virtues compared to vices. And so if I'm walking on the dance floor and I'm filled with my own vice, and one of the biggest vices is pride.
Of course.
That can be an automatic barrier, because then it's not about us, it's about me. Right. And how I look, and is based into selfishness, and then you get to be the brunt of that piece, and I can see that being distressful for anybody.
And sometimes like insecurity can be something that kind of motivates you to not work on virtue. Like, for example, when I first started partner dancing, I was, and I'm still not perfect. I'm still working on it, like with different partners or with different styles, but like, it was funny because I literally got into a dance style. Like I had years and years and years of like working on like ballet and point, all dances where you just move your body by yourself. Right. And it's all just about kind of self-training. And then I found a style I fell in love with. And the thing that I really wanted to be good at was receiving. And that was the thing I was terrible at. So sometimes I would dance with my partner and and it was usually a technical thing. Like I wasn't connecting with him, and I wasn't receiving his movements. Really, I was anticipating, and I would try to, I would have to kind of stop and say, I know it feels like I don't want to dance with you, but I do. I'm literally working on the thing I want the most is the thing I stink the most at. You know what I mean? Like I want this thing that I don't have yet. I mean, and the whole, like the virtuous life is something you're working towards. Like, well, we don't have it, right? I'm working towards it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm just here to just do all the things I do best, you know, and just like feel really good about myself. It's like, no, me getting on the floor and practicing with my partner means I'm going to look at myself and be like, okay, I'm not doing this part well, and why, you know? And sometimes like, you know, like it's not malicious. Sometimes it's because you have old habits. Sometimes you're like insecure about yourself, like being attractive or a good dancer, and you just want to like showcase yourself, right? But then that's insecurity. Like you have to look at yourself and be like, okay, I'm insecure, but I can't let that insecurity prevent me from working on virtue. You know what I mean? So, and I can't let that insecurity prevent me from being a good partner. Like there are many times I have to look at myself and be like, okay, I'm feeling insecure right now about how good I am as a dancer and blah, 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 blah. Right. But I had to sacrifice that for the sake of that. I want something I don't have. I want to move as a unit with this other person and create something beautiful. Right.
Wow.
And I remember talking to, and I'm not in marriage prep right now, but I'm in a serious relationship that's moving towards marriage prep. And I remember I was talking to my therapist who's Catholic, and he was like, marriage is not about you. Marriage is not about you, Monica. And I was like, yeah, I think I knew that, but still it's great to hear you say it. He was like, marriage is about two people surrendering themselves to Christ. And, you know, in that sense, it's not about you. It's not about like, oh, like me and how good I am and my, you know, like, oh, I'm insecure. I was like, okay, yes, I'm insecure about how I am as a dancer. I'm going to like put that on the back burner, and I'm going to work to become, to move well with you in this moment. We were just working on a particular moment. And so even though I wasn't married, having dance partners that I worked with consistently, I feel like taught me some of these lessons about how you work with another person to create something together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, before you get to what was your best experience, what about eye contact? You know, how people look at each other. Can you speak towards that? What does eye contact or the lack of eye contact say when it comes to your partner?
So I think that if you're well, let me say, if performing and competing are very different, because you're telling a story. If you're performing or competing, you're telling a story with that other person.
Okay.
So to not make eye contact with them ever, you would tell no story that would be engaging. Now, social dancing is different. Some people, it kind of depends on the personality of the person. Like I have, like, for example, my boyfriend who has you know, social dancing background, not really a competitive or performance background like I do. Like he enjoyed social dancing because he's more of an introvert, and it gave him a way to kind of close enough to a person to kind of talk with them, right? And whereas there are some people that like kind of more like myself, or like where if I go social dancing, you know, I'm there for more of the experience of moving with another person and creating something great. Like I'm there to like make a great dance and then walk off the floor. And if I don't become friends with that person, like that's fine. Now, I think it is courteous if you're social dancing. And I've been in social dancing. I was just actually social dancing a week ago, and I realized, I was like, oh, I think I'm doing something that other girls aren't doing. Like I am asking the guy their name, and then I'm saying thank you for the dance afterwards. And it's a very, very, very small thing, but I noticed I was getting a lot of dances, and I was like, oh, maybe this is like something other people don't do when they're social dancing. Now, I think that's a courteous thing to do when somebody's like, hey, why don't we both go on the floor and we could look ridiculous or great? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the guy's taking a risk, right? And you're taking a risk too by accepting the dance. So to kind of, and I ask the person's name so that I can say thank you and then say their name. And I just know from psychology, like if you say somebody's name, they automatically will feel like more affection from that sentence than if you just didn't say their name. It makes it more personal, right? So so I say like eye contact has to do with kind of how much do you want to engage with your partner, your person while you're dancing, how much socializing do you want to do during dancing. And if the person doesn't make a lot of eye contact to you with it while you're dancing, then I wouldn't necessarily take it personally. It's like, okay, well, maybe that's not the kind of experience they want to have. But if you're like, oh, I want to chat, then go find somebody who seems more like a little more extroverted, more outgoing, and you might strike up a conversation and get to know somebody while they're dancing, you know? Yeah. So I would say like it's kind of because you're coming together and you're having an experience together, and you're really, again, you're coming together with somebody else. Okay, we're gonna make something. It might be great, it might be not, it might be mediocre. You know, maybe we're both learning. We're both beginners, and we get up there and we only can do like this much. Okay,
Right.
whatever, right? That's how you grow. So I would say like that's kind of what I would say with eye contact. Like I said, performing and competing is very different because you're telling a story, and
Right.
people watch you. Even when people watch other people dance, they're not always watching their legs and their bodies. Oftentimes, they're watching the dancers' faces. They're like, "What's going on? Like, is it happy? Is it fun? Is it enjoyable?" Right? And if both people are just like, you know, the whole time, right? You're just
Yeah.
like, what? It automatically is like, well, I don't want to do that, or like
Right.
I don't want to dance with them, and I don't want to dance with them because they both look miserable, right? So it's kind of like if you would see two people in a relationship, like a boyfriend and girlfriend, they both look miserable all the time. You'd be like,
Right.
well, if I was a guy, I wouldn't want to be with her and him, and I'm like vice versa. You know what I mean? So because neither of them looks happy. So like I said, but when you're performing, like when you're performing, you're competing. It's a whole other thing, and you have to look at the song and the dance and be like, well, what kind of is it? A flirty, fun dance, or is it a little more sensual, or is it more
Right.
intimate, or is it a tango where I'm mad at you for part of the dance? You know what I mean? Like, so it's different. But I have
Interesting.
experience doing both. So
Interesting. There's so much to that. You know, as you're speaking, I think one thing that people struggle with, you know, we all struggle, is
of
rejection. You
course.
know, I think of, you know, because I went to public school, but I think of, you know, you're asking that you're in middle school, you ask that person to dance with you, and they say no. You know, everybody experiences rejection.
Right.
But how do people deal with rejection when it comes to dancing? Because there's always, you talk about there's always that risk. Any thoughts about rejection and how to work with that in partner
Well,
dancing?
I'm not a lead. I work, you know, I can lead because I'm a teacher. I have to
Right.
know the lead to teach the lead.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that, I mean, when it comes to, we're talking more kind of in the realm of like a social dance, like
Right.
a social dance experience primarily. Like, I think that, you know, it has to, I think I have to kind of make an analogy between dating and dancing here because, um, you know, unless you have, and this is kind of this is more of my like education. I'll definitely credit Laura Doyle with some of the things I'm saying. That unless you have, say you're at a dance, unless you have like just downright gut reaction, bad response to a person. So if you see that person and just like in your gut, you have a bad reaction to that person.
Yeah.
Don't, like, as a man or a woman, listen to your gut. Don't ignore your
Right.
gut. Even if you can't say like, I'm not sure why that person gives me the creeps, right? Listen to your gut. Now, if that person does not give you that feeling, I think as a lady, say, for example, and we're talking very, you know, traditionally, of course, where the gentleman would ask the lady to dance. And even as a very assertive woman, like I let the gentleman ask as well. Especially, I mean, I'm also very aware of the fact that as soon as I go social dancing, that I am an instructor, and I don't want to come off like, oh, I'm an instructor, I know everything, you know, like
Right.
that kind of a thing. So I let the offers kind of come my way, or they don't, you know. So because I'm gonna have fun dancing no matter what, to be honest, because that's where I'm at, you know. Even the dance is just like he's focused on himself most of the time. It's like I can have some degree of enjoyment from the dance. But I think as a lady, it's like dating. Like unless a person gives you like in your gut an awful feeling, say yes to one dance, you know, be polite, give the man a chance, you know. And hey, if it's one dance and you're like, okay, I don't, you know, it was okay, but I wouldn't choose to dance with him again, you know, then
Right.
don't say yes again, you know. I actually have gone as I've gone as so far. Actually, when I was started social dancing recently, when I went to the social dance a week ago, if I enjoyed the dance with the guy, I said, you know, I would say, hey, what was your name? If I didn't ask earlier, and they'd say, oh, it's Jonathan. And we say, thank you, Jonathan. You know, why don't you come grab me for another? So I affirm that, hey, I had fun. You did a great job. We looked great. You know, I would say yes to another one. And that's kind of also something I kind of like learned from Laurel Doyle and her receiving and what it means to surrender. It's like, it's kind of like a game of tennis. I didn't ask him to dance with me, but I tossed the tennis ball in his court, and I'm like, okay, if you hit the ball to me, I'd hit back. You know, if you asked me to dance, I'd say yes. You don't have to, you know, but I'm letting you know that I wouldn't like crush you if you know, asked me. I would hit the ball back to you if you hit it on my side of the court,
Wow.
you know. So, and I think I think that's like, that's kind of maybe a very nuanced way of working, you know, charity into, you know,
Right.
social
Charity.
etiquette perhaps. But I would say I would really make a comparison to dating, because I think in dating you can say a similar thing, unless you have like a, gut bad feeling about that person, what's the worst that can happen? You're gonna go on the, you're going on the dance floor, you dance, it was okay, you wouldn't necessarily relive the experience again, but you learned, you had a good time, he had a good time, he probably learned how to lead a little better, and maybe you learned how to receive a little better, who knows, right? And then you go on to the next partner, So, does that can answer your question?
That does. It's just very informative, and I think you all already answered what your best dance experience is just by what you talked about. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what makes a good dance experience? I think you pretty much covered that, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
Well, no, I think it is it's a dance where I think the best dances I've had are ones where the partner's ability is compatible with your own ability. So you not only are they good at initiating and then kind of taking care of you in the dance, like they're aware of where you are, right? And if you kind of maybe stumble a little bit, they kind of just, they move through it, right? They don't like stop and are like, now what, right? But that is skill. Like that is a technique and a skill. So it's not necessarily, oh, you can't just all chalk it up to virtue. Like there is a skill to knowing, like, okay, if there's a little slip in the dance, kind of how to like get yourself back on beat and go into the next thing. Okay. My partner that I dance with right now, primarily, he's very good at that. I mean, he's been dancing for like over 17 years, but I would say the best dances are where, you are compatible with that person in terms of like both can move as fast, follow and follow and lead like on a very, very quickly. And it's almost like when you meet somebody and you're having a back, like you're like just banter back and forth. Like they know what you're going to say and you can jump off what they're saying, and before you know it, like 2 hours has gone by. You know what I mean? Like those are the best dances, I would say, when that person's compatible with your ability. And they also like, oh, I'm also going to, I recognize that we're making something together,
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
If I could throw, as you're talking, so I hear what you're saying about partner dancing and how it's a partnership. If I could throw something out of the Old Testament just to see, and you may not have an answer to this, but there's a story when King David was coming back with the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. You know that story.
Yeah.
And I think he had a moment of abandonment. So there he was just so filled with joy that he danced with abandon.
Yes.
But you remember that story? But then his wife, I think she was the daughter of Saul. I should probably know this, but his wife was looking, and she's a princess or a queen, and so she's up in this tower. She's looking at this entourage, and there's her king husband just dancing his heart out. Mm-hmm. And she looked at him with disdain. She said, like, okay, you are a king. How can you behave like that? How can you dance like that? And then I think she got judged, and there were some things with that. But
right,
can you speak to abandonment? I mean, is there a good place to dance with just with abandonment, with just complete joy, regardless of what people may think or do? Is there a place within
absolutely
femininity for that type of thing?
Well, you could look. It's like I make this analogy actually a lot when I teach. It's like when you learn to dance, and this is how I get men interested in dancing. When men realize there's steps and there's a structure they can learn, anticipate, and build with, dancing becomes a lot less scary. Most men I've met are not initially comfortable improvising on the dance floor. Now, I think part of that has to do with like just kind of social judgment, right? That like dancing is more feminine, and that's just something we've carried from, I would argue it's our Puritan / Protestant roots as a country, but I'm not going to get into that. But like you can dance with abandon even within say like when you're partner dancing with somebody else and building something together in a structure. But like just like for example, you will not have freedom to be a creative writer if you don't understand the rules of grammar. You don't know how letters make sounds. I'm teaching third graders right now because I'm a third grade teacher at the moment. And like, I'm trying to I'm like, I've got one kid, I'm like, I hate grammar. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you hate grammar? I know this kid likes to write things.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I like to read and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, you can't express your ideas in a written or verbal, nor can you read really advanced text if you don't understand the rules of grammar. Right. The same thing, once you understand kind of the basics, like system of, say, a dance, right? So for example, you know, like Hustle. Hustle's a really fun dance. I love Hustle. Once you know that, and that's muscle memory, and you don't have to think about that. You only get it by muscle memory by practicing. Just like you only get to become you only get to write fun things or poems or be a creative writer, write your own book, write your own book series when you know how words work, how phonics work, and how like the English language, and the English language is weird, you know, like you only get that joy when you have on some grasp with the structure. Right? And dancing is a similar way. Now, can you just like throw yourself on the dance floor? And I was like, absolutely. But I would also say you can find that same kind of abandon in partner dancing. The abandon in dancing period comes from when you dance, and I'm going to say specifically partner dancing first. When you dance with a partner, you have to be completely present to that moment. The virtue of the moment calls for your entire physical, mental, and emotional attention, because you have to pay attention to your partner, you have to pay attention to your body, you have to pay attention to the music. So it's like a kind of this very cathartic experience where, like, in order to do the thing, in order to do the activity, you have to be totally there. And I was trying to explain this to people why I was able to articulate this when I found myself telling people, like, oh, I'm gonna do a 180 in my career and I'm gonna go teach ballroom dancing at Fred Astaire, you know, because I was like, for me, dancing was a cathartic experience that was, and that's part of the reason why dancing is so stress relieving, because you can't be anywhere else. I mean, the lead can be a couple steps ahead. The lead can be thinking about, like, okay, what step do I want to do, like third, fourth, fifth from now? But he can do that, right? He can do that. Even as a follow, you can be like aware, but like that's all you can think about. Like I can't think about like, what am I doing tomorrow? Like, did I call so and so? Like, you know, what does my mom think of me? You know what I mean? Like I can't think about these things. I have to. And the music of course is therapeutic. So the music helps, of course, right? Kind of add that therapeutic moment. So, and if you're dancing on your own, it can be it's an absolutely similar experience. I mean, I think that culturally, like socially, it's more acceptable for women to dance with abandon. It's less socially acceptable for men to dance with abandon, and that's just some cultures, not every culture. But you can do that on your own. You can do that in a partnership. But even like if you're to do it by yourself, you still have to be aware of the music. You still have to be aware of your body, and like that's really all that is happening in that moment. So, does that answer your question?
That did. This is awesome. We have a few more minutes left. It sounds like we could have another conversation on this.
I could talk about this for hours.
Well, it's what you do. Well, this could be a time to put in a plug. Is there anything coming up that you feel that people can get involved in the diocese? I know this video will be out there all the time, but I mean, maybe I could say it this way. Yeah. Could you give the last why you would encourage people to pursue dancing, particularly couples that maybe having some struggles? Could you give an appeal of why social partner dancing and learning how to do that would be good for a relationship?
Why? Because it is a concrete experience. It's like learning in the flesh compassion, because you can't. It's like putting your body and your mind and your soul through an experience of literally building compassion, because you can't dance. I remember my instructor in Tim Cower, and when I took my first ballroom lesson, he actually had a group full of like college age kids, you know, like 20 to 30 kids, and he would make us all learn how to do the lead, and he would make us learn all how to do the follow, regardless of what part you were going to dance. And the reason he says, like, you're going to learn how to do this so that you can develop compassion for your partner. Like if, say, maybe they don't do the right thing, they miss a step, right, or they make a mistake, right? So, and you develop humility. You develop compassion and humility, because you have to be aware of the other person, what they're trying to accomplish, and you have to focus on doing your part well in order for the unit to work at all.
Yeah.
So you really have to you have to die to yourself a little bit. You can't nitpick at your partner. And I've worked with many couples, so I've figured you can kind of learn how to be like a bit of a marriage counselor, in the sense that like you help the individual like almost focus on themselves, not in a selfish way, you know, but like, what does the world need? The world needs men and women who have a personal relationship with Christ. They don't need people going around and being like, you didn't do this and you didn't do that and you missed your step. right? So,
I think that,
and literally the partner dancing as an activity does not work unless you do not focus on yourself in that way.
it's interesting, and we're going to wrap up on this one. So, is it fair to say that Catholic femininity and even Catholic masculinity, the virtues with that is compassion and humility? Would you say those are two of the virtues that really undercuts everything? Being compassionate, or being charitable,
Mm-hmm.
and being humble, and having. Would you agree that having those virtues is probably the key for, and probably just for life, but
Well,
particularly
for life, for sure. I would say also charity, because charity is love, right? And charity calls
yeah,
into like, okay, you might have to sacrifice for the sake of love.
right,
Right? So when I come together with another person, like if I'm in a dance, I'll hear the song and I'm like, oh, I know that song and I really like that song. Okay, but as a receiver, right? Like, I don't get to choose every single one of the moves all the time. Now I get to decide, how do I want to respond to it? Do I want to like respond to the move like the music's like a little like upbeat? I can be more upbeat, or I can be a little more mellow, right? So like I don't get to have my way all the time.
yeah,
I have to. There are times when I'm little tiny little moments where I'm called to sacrifice something, and then humility, because you're not going to do it perfectly all the time. And even I mean, I'm not a perfect follow, right? But just like my partner's not a perfect lead. So humility in the sense of like, you're going to make a mistake, right? Your partner might give you a really good initiation for a lead, and as a follow, you might miss it or misinterpret it. Okay, and maybe there is a saying that's like, it's always the lead's fault, but I don't think that's always true, because as a receiver, you can set yourself up in a place where you badly receive.
yeah,
You can. So just like, I mean, if you, it's like what they say, like, you'll find what you look for. If you look around always to be offended, and to be hurt, you'll find it.
yeah.
Like if you look for people that are helping and that are loving and that are compassionate, you will find that. So I would say compassion, I would say humility, and I would say charity, because it's not all about you all the time.